let's talk a little bit about what you and I see and any differences that we might have
Mhm.
about this period of time that we find ourselves in 2019. What would you say is the dominant narrative before we get to what might be our shared kind of counter narrative?
The dominant narrative is probably fraying and has been fraying for some time, but it is something like, we're in a world of generally fast scientific and technological progress. Things are getting better all the time. There's some imbalances that maybe need to be smoothed out. There's some corner case problems. Maybe there's some dystopian risks because the technology is so fast and so scary that it might be destructive. But it's a generally accelerationist story. Obviously, a very big exception to this has been the world of bits, computers, internet, mobile internet, software, and so Silicon Valley has somehow been this dramatic exception.
This gets to another topic, which I think is really important, and it's a dangerous one to discuss, which is it seems to me that power laws, those distributions with very thick tails, where you have a small number of outliers that often dominate all other activity, are ubiquitous, and that particularly with respect to talent, whether we like them or not, they seem to be present where a small number of people do a fantastic amount of all of the innovation.
One of my friends is a professor in the Stanford economics department, and the way he describes it to me is they have about 30 graduate students starting PhDs in economics at Stanford every year. It's 6 to 8 years to get a PhD. At the end of the first year, the faculty has an implicit ranking of the students where they sort of agree to who the top 3 or 4 are. The ranking never changes. The top 3 or 4 are able to get a good position in academia. The others not so much. And this is it. We're pretending to be kind to people, and we're actually being cruel.
Incredibly cruel. Given our central belief that there was something about growth that led to universal betrayal by institutions, which has compromised experts in the minds of most people. Do you think there's a preferred way of waking up as a society out of a kind of universal institutional betrayal? If we're excited about the next chapter, what I'd love to talk to you about in a future episode is what we're excited about what comes next. Is there a way of waking up from this most gracefully?
It strikes me that there are ways we don't want to wake up. And we don't want to wake up in a way where it de-energizes us and demotivates. And so, so I think one of the ways I think these institutions worked was, they took care of people, but it was also, motivational. You study, you get good grades, you'll succeed in our system.
Right.
And so one way, when you sort of deconstruct these institutions, there's sort of one direction that I think is always very dangerous, that it just shifts people into sort of a much more nihilistic, very low energy mode where it's just, well, there's no point, nothing can be done, and that's the way that's the way that I definitively do not want to wake people up. And so I think it has to always be coupled a little bit to, there are these paths that aren't really going anywhere, and you shouldn't go down these paths. But then there's some other paths here that you need to take. There's a portal here that you need to look at. And if we are just saying all the paths are blocked, I think probably the risk is people just sit down where they are and stop moving altogether. And that feels like the very wrong way to wake people up.